Hello, everyone. I want to thank you for joining us today as we explore the topic of addressing trauma, equity, mental health, and learning gaps through a structured school or system-wide strategy. As they said, my name is Miguel Angel Soria. I'm the Director of Educational Content Development at Lifelong Learning, and I have the honor of being your moderator today. I want to thank everyone and again, let you know that we will be having time for a Q&A at the end of this presentation. So please have your questions ready because we're really looking forward to that part of the session. Now, I would like to take the time to introduce our presenters, our esteemed presenters. Joining us today is Dr. Caprice Young. As the National Superintendent of Lifelong Learning, including the Learn for Life Schools, Flex Academy, and Stanza International Academy, Dr. Caprice Young serves 49,000 secondary school students in more than 85 learning centers in California, Ohio, and Michigan. Learn for Life re-engages opportunity youth, achieving a 90% success rate. Raised in a foster family, Dr. Young brings her own family experience to her work with students who have experienced trauma prior to changing their story at Learn for Life. She's a recipient of the Coral Foundation Crystal Eagle Award for Achievement in Public Service, the California State University Educator of the Year in 2016, and an inductee to the National Charter School Hall of Fame. Dr. Young serves on the board of several organizations, including the Fordham Foundation and the Savvy Source. She has been the adjunct faculty member of the UCLA Graduate School of Education and Information Science. Her educational background includes a doctorate of education from UCLA, a master's in public administration from USC, and a bachelor's from Yale University. Our next presenter is Dr. Shelton L. Jeffries. Dr. Jeffries has dedicated 24 years of his life as an educator, where he has shown a consistent commitment to improving student access to rigorous coursework and preparing students for a career success. He currently serves as Vice President of National Growth with Lifelong Learning. His responsibilities include educational product and partnership development. Dr. Jeffries has served as an elementary school principal, a high school principal, and also a superintendent of Nash Rocky Mount Public Schools. As a leader of a system serving 15,000 students, he brought integrated student supports to arm schools in the identification of risk factors and the implementation of interventions to address barriers such as chronic absenteeism. Last but not least is Craig Beswick. Mr. Beswick is the Vice President of School Development at Lifelong Learning, including serving as the Executive Lead for Trauma-Resilient Educational Community-Related Partnerships in Outreach, Counseling, and Workforce Development. Mr. Beswick began his career as an educational specialist for Access Incorporated, while also serving as a high school teacher. Based on that experience, Mr. Beswick earned a principal position at Diego Valley High School. He then became a regional principal. Mr. Beswick supported the integration of the TREC school model into all schools within the Learn for Life network. He has conducted hundreds of presentations and trainings at schools and conferences, including the National Trauma Informed Schools Conference, the Jobs for American Graduate National Conference, and the California Workforce Association Conference. Mr. Beswick also serves as a co-chair of the training committee for the San Diego Trauma Informed Guide Team, the co-chair of the San Diego Community ACES Connection Collaborative of Communities, and is a Heart Math certified trainer. He has earned a master's degree from Alliant University, a bachelor's in teaching credential from Westchester University, and he meritoriously served as a Patriot missile operator in the United States Army. So let's give our panel a warm virtual welcome, and I'll see you again during our Q&A session.
All right, welcome everybody. So Caprice, would you like to lead us through the poll questions?
Sure, I can do that. I think I can do that. We have the poll questions, and the NCSC staff is going to give you a special code. But what we're looking to find out is what role do you represent? What organization do you represent, and what is your role? And that's the first one. Let's start with that one. You'll see it's in the chat too. Welcome, Rosemary. Okay, as soon as you're done with the first one, let's go to the second one. And that is, where is your organization on the trauma-informed journey? Are you just starting out, or in the middle, or distinguished? Okay. Hi, Alejandra. Nice to have you on. We're sharing the poll results, and in terms of where people are on their journeys, it looks like we've got a combination of beginning and middle so far. And then, are you and your organization looking to form partners in this work? Is our last question. It's great. Well, we believe in partnership. I think partnership is kind of the way of life in the charter school world. Like, we've all figured out that that the best way to get things right is to really learn from other people who have gotten things right, and then to build on those experiences. And certainly that's what we do at Learn for Life. And um, in California, one of the actual requirements of charter schools is that you share what you're doing and share what you're learning. It's actually written into our legislation. So we're actively sharing. Just a quick little bit about us. We are a public charter school. We're actually a network of public charter schools, and we serve 49,000 students in 85 centers in California, Ohio, and Michigan, and we're growing. All of our students are formerly disengaged students. That's our sweet spot. We really are focused on the kids that the traditional school systems can't reach for a whole variety of reasons. And so what we've done is we've created a fully flexible program that allows students to start any day of the year. They can come a couple of days a week and do a lot of their work independently, or they can stay on site and work with tutors all day long. And that's an important thing for our students, because sometimes they've got work, they've got family, and we want to make sure that education matches the student wherever the student is, instead of the student having to conform their life to the requirements of a school schedule. We also do all one-on-one attention. We also do personalized learning lessons, and we make sure that we're creating a safe environment for our students. So since a lot of our students were bullied and left school because of being bullied, we want them to know that they're in a space that's safe. And then we also have kids, some of whom were the bullies, and we want to create an environment where we can support them in their healing and recovery as well. I know that sounds weird to say, recovering and healing from being a bully, but there is an important component to that. And of course, we also really focus on what comes after high school. So making sure that our students are getting the job skills that they need to be successful. And if they want to go to college, and about 45% of our students do go to college, making sure that they have the skills that they need for that as well. And sometimes it's not either or, it's students putting themselves through college. And that's basically who we are. So like a lot of charter schools, we've carved out a little niche. And these are some statistics about the students that we serve. As you can see, our students tend to be older. A lot of them have aged out. They tend to be socioeconomically disadvantaged. They also have often missed a lot of school, an average of 80 days that they've missed between when they left whatever school they had once been in and when they come to us. About 16% are special ed. And most of our students, when they start with us, are 17 or so, and they're starting reading at an elementary school level. So we've created programs to be able to really support them. Among other things, we use Read 180, but more than that, we also just really do a ton of one-on-one work with every single one of our students. And I think one of the things that makes us the most successful is that we have this thing called TREC, which refers to trauma resilient education communities. And we work to make sure that every single one of our schools is a trauma resilient education community. And that means that each school is learning the basics of ACEs, which refers to Adverse Childhood Experiences Science. They learn how ACEs can affect a student learning and their school performance so that all of our staff can be able to provide the supports that the students need in the ACEs context. In this, we're also going to talk about one of the things that we do called heart math, which is really about finding ways to calm your physiology and be able to create mental focus. So we'll teach you a little bit about that in this today. And it's just something that we've started doing that really works for us. And so with that, let's get going.
All right. Thank you so much, Caprice and Miguel, for that illustrious introduction. I'm really excited to be a part of this team, to be a part of this movement, to create this ecosystem of trauma resilient educational communities. And one of the foundations of what we build everything upon is relationships. And the ability to build relationships is predicated on having empathy. So I'm going to take you through a little bit of an exercise. You do not have to do this if you do not want to, but I want to take you through an exercise in empathy. And the term empathy is used to describe a wide range of experiences. Emotional researchers generally define empathy as the ability to sense other people's emotions, coupled with the ability to imagine what someone else might be thinking or feeling. So I'm going to take you through a little bit of an exercise. If you have a piece of paper or a little small whiteboard, you can break it out right now. And for the next minute, in your best stick figure drawing, I would like for you to draw a stick figure family. The only caveat for your family is that it has to have a student in the picture. So you can have mom, dad, student. You can have mom, dad, dog, student. You can have mom, student. So you get where I'm going with this. So just for a minute, let's put pen to paper and start to draw our stick figure family. And here is my absolutely amazing stick figure family right now. So I have dad, mom, and student in my family. So I'm going to give you about 45 more seconds to actually put pen to paper and to do this. And it makes me think of an analogy. In a lot of the techniques that I use, meditation techniques, heart math techniques, there's a lot of journaling. And when I train people, they say, oh, well, I'm just going to do the exercise in my head. There's something very important about the tactile nature of doing these exercises and actually putting the pen to paper and actually writing out, drawing your family, and then doing the second step of the exercise, because it really connects it. It helps connect really your heart and your brain and starts to really deepen the understanding of whatever exercise or journaling activity you are doing. So I'm going to give you just about 10 more seconds. Don't worry, you don't have to turn them in or anything like that. What I actually want you to do is I'd like for you to take your paper right now that has your beautiful stick figure family, and I want you to crumple it up. Really crumple it up. I hear some crumpling, so I know my co-presenters are crumpling with me, so that's good. Now what I'd like you to do is I'd like for you to unfurl. It's actually a word, I checked it in the dictionary. I'd like for you to unfurl your family. Now, hopefully at this point, you start to smell what I'm cooking here, because this is the way that our families and our students come to us. They come scarred. They come with adverse childhood experiences, and we'll talk about the science of that in a moment. This is the way they come to us. Now, what I'd like for you to do at this point is I'd like for you to actually start to try and smooth out all these wrinkles, all these scars, all these past traumas, right? Some of them are not visible physically, right? They're deep down emotionally. And we know, there's a great book called The Body Keeps Score. We know that when we don't process our trauma, especially as children, and we don't have the frontal cortex to do so, that we lock that trauma somewhere in our body, creates energy blockages, can manifest at a physical level with heart attacks and all other types of things that we don't want to happen. So that is our job as educators. It's not just to give academic skills, it's to help students, especially today, in a pandemic world, even pre-pandemic, to make sure that we can really smooth out to the extent that we can these scars and these traumas. And that is through helping our students develop resiliency. The second part of the exercise, and you don't have to do this right now, but what we usually do in a live setting is I actually have you write down something traumatic that happened to you on the back of this paper. So for me, I'll lead with vulnerability. I, at the age of 14, after a divorce in Philadelphia, became gang affiliated and had a substance abuse problem. And really that created a lot of anxiety, depression, PTSD. I struggled with those things for a long time. And that was very traumatic. That divorce, at the time, I didn't understand it. But, Socrates said, an unexamined life is a life not worth living. So as I started to kind of Sherlock Holmes my own life and my own negative tendencies, I realized that the root of a lot of those was that divorce and the walls that I built up around it. So usually what we do is we write it down, we crumple it up, and then we throw it. Right? I used to have trash cans, or sometimes I'll run around the setting and let people throw their trauma at me. But the other part of it is that if you're in the live setting, we would have people actually read. We'd throw them in the can, and then we would just pick out people's traumas and we would read them and start to create that empathy that is so key to this work. So what are we talking about? What is trauma? Experts explain that trauma is not the event itself, but rather a response to a highly stressful experience in which a person's ability to cope is dramatically undermined. So that's an important distinction. We never want to get into a situation where we are judging the level of somebody's trauma. If 20 million people were infected by a virus that caused anxiety, impulsivity, aggression, sleep problems, depression, respiratory and heart problems, vulnerability to substance abuse, antisocial and criminal behavior, and school failure, we would consider it an urgent public health crisis. Yet in the United States alone, there are more than 20 million abused, neglected, and traumatized children vulnerable to these problems. Our society has yet to recognize this epidemic, let alone develop an immunization strategy. And this quote was from 2003. But I venture to say that our trauma resilient educational community model, and a lot of the work that's been done by ACES Connection and a lot of the movers and shakers in the trauma informed field, that this developing resiliency, this strategy of developing resiliency is an immunization strategy for this growing epidemic. And obviously now that this epidemic is growing exponentially in the current COVID pandemic. So it all starts with ACES Science for us. We had the pleasure of interviewing Dr. Felitti not too long ago down in San Diego. And it's interesting because the original ACES Science study started in a weight loss clinic in San Diego, where Dr. Felitti and Dr. Anda with the CDC could not figure out why predominantly white middle-class men, pounds away from death, morbidly obese, with the best diets, the best clinicians, would not fight to save their lives. They couldn't understand. So Dr. Felitti started the ACES questionnaire, which was 10 questions, and it's like golf. You want a low score. Out of the 10 questions, you get a score. And what they realized was the higher the score, the higher the cascade of co-occurring effects, which were heart attack, alcoholism, physical abuse, sexual abuse, all of kind of the ills of society. My score is an 8 out of 10, and it has taken me a long time to understand that that score is not your destiny, because what can be honored and brought to light can be changed. And that can be done through honoring this ACE of science and developing resiliency. So you can see from the original study, and there's been a ton of studies that have come after it around ACEs, but we know that it has an impact on the brain, neurobiology, impact on the body. We know that it creates toxic stress, and toxic stress is literally being stuck in your amygdala, stuck in that fight, flight, or freeze. Epigenetics, which is the effect of trauma on genetics and how it can be passed down from generation to generation. And resilience building, the most important part. So it's interesting because they looked at it and they figured out that the difference between a 4 and a 6 meant a 20-year decrease in life expectancy. But again, let's remember, what is predictable is preventable. So I want to show you this real quick. The other things that ACEs science showed just regarding learning was that students that had ACEs scores or had trauma were 2.5 times more likely to fail school. They have lower test scores. They're suspended, expelled, and jailed at much higher levels. And they're placed into special education classes at much higher levels. So this is literally a PET scan of a healthy brain of a 5-year-old and an abused brain of a 5-year-old. And what you see on the left side is a lot of high activity, which is great, right? A lot of reds and yellow and green, really showing all the activity amongst the temporal lobes where we have emotional regulation, feelings of self-worth, the ability to self-regulate. On the right side, you see the brain of a 5-year-old Romanian orphan. And what you see in those circles is literally inactivity, quiescence. And this is in the area where we develop feelings of love, where we develop that sense of self, that ability to love ourselves. What's awesome is that with things like meditation, heart math, there was a study in Harvard that proved that people that had never meditated before, if they meditate 2 times a day for 8 weeks, that they literally proved that you can grow gray matter in your frontal lobes. So that is a really good, I think, segue into our resiliency programs that we offer under TREC. I did want to mention that if you see Penning the Pandemic, that was a curriculum that we created to allow students to write their own stories about what they were, going through during the pandemic, and what, how they were expressing themselves, how they could express themselves. So again, amazing class. We will be able to offer that if you email us towards the end of the session. We will send you copies of that along with a trauma resilient educational communities assessment, which we'll talk about a little bit later. But here are just some of our resiliency programs. SOURCE is an amazing class, Students of United Respect, Consciousness, and Energy. We align them with mentors from different state colleges throughout California. And the essence of that is to learn how to create your reality with your thoughts, words, and action. Everything is energy, and energy cannot be destroyed. It can be transformed. So we really teach the basics of that and are excited about the results. We're getting really good at our data, but our baseline data, what we did is we looked at all of our students and we looked at any student that was in one of these programs versus students that perhaps did not select one of these programs. And what we found out was that students in resiliency programs outperform students that weren't by an average of 10% in every educational metric we have. GPA, credits earned, graduation rate, so on and so on. For our Black and Brown students, the increase was 20%. So I think we're on to something, but we definitely need to get a little bit better with our data, and we're continuing to do that. So this is from HeartMath, and what this is showing is that the heart rhythms directly affect brain centers involved in foresight, decision-making, social awareness, and our ability to self-regulate. The incoherent heart rate variance scale on the left and the coherent heart rate variance scale on the right in blue shows what happens when we allow depleting emotions into our life, we experience depleting emotions, which I can link every single one of them to fear, right? Jealousy, hatred, anger, all those nasty things. And what happens is your autonomic nervous system, which is sending signals from your heart to your brain, will create this really erratic pattern. And what this erratic pattern is akin to is if you were a car pressing the brake and the gas at the same time. And I think you can imagine what would happen to a car if you did that. So imagine what happens to our bodies if we are in an incoherent state. And this again is in relation to what's called heart rate variance, which is different than just a heartbeat or your heart beats per minute, because each individual heartbeat is actually a different signature and a different time length. But when we can utilize things like heart focused breathing, which is the core tactic or core exercise of heart math, we can create coherence. And coherence is aligned to renewing emotions that I can align all of those to love. So I just wanted to show you this. Heart Math is an amazing program. You should check it out online, tons of science. But I'm going to end with a 2-minute exercise if you'd like to do it with me. I'm going to take you through heart-focused breathing. And I want you to know that doing this for 2 to 3 minutes, for the next 72 hours, the most positive hormones that you have in your body will be released from your pineal gland to your pituitary gland to all of your organs through your bloodstream, melatonin, serotonin, decreased cortisol, which is the stress hormone. All these things can happen for 72 hours in your body by simply doing the technique that I'm going to show you now. So if you'd like to join me, what I'd like for you to do is I'd like for you to, you can do this eyes open or eyes closed, is I'd like for you to slowly start to bring your awareness, because where we bring our awareness is where we bring our energy. So I'd like you to bring the awareness into your heart space. And I'd like for you to just focus on the breath entering upon inhalation and exiting upon exhalation from your heart space. If you have problems in putting your attention into your heart space, you can put your hand over your heart. But if you'd like to practice with me for a couple minutes, we can go ahead and do that now. And what you'll notice is that your breath, your inhalation and your exhalation will start to slow down. Again, just focusing on the heart area, allowing awareness and breath to enter your heart space upon inhalation and to exit your heart space upon exhalation. Breathing deeper and slower as we focus attention on our heart. All right, folks, slowly bring yourself back. If your eyes were closed, you can open them now. Thank yourself for the work that you have just done in honoring your self-care and honoring the fact that for the next 72 hours, again, some really great hormones are going to be flooding through your body, making you feel better. And I really want to thank you for allowing me to show you a little bit of that technique. We can use this technique as a part of our general meditation or self-care sessions. We can use this before a stressful meeting. We can use this after a stressful meeting. And I really encourage you to check out the HeartMath website for just the litany of great science that is around HeartMath. You know, the US Navy, professional sports teams, prisons, our school system is all using HeartMath with great benefit. So with that, I'd like to kick it over to my esteemed colleague, Dr. Shelton Jeffries.
Thank you, Craig. As we shared, Learn for Life, our charter network supports 49,000 students in over 100 resource centers. Those resource centers are located in California, Ohio, and Michigan. As a part of this journey, all of our schools become TREC accredited. The core elements of our model for TREC accreditation are the foundations, which is every 2 years, the assignment of a resiliency person. They'll take leadership of the school development process, running the oversight committee and the facilitator trainings. Our bridge to wellness, which focuses on DEI, self-care, and restorative justice. The TREC framework, and the formal ACEs connection, which is approximately a 2-year process. Because of our model, we were well prepared for the challenges related with the pandemic. We were not perfect, but due to the fluency of our model, we were well prepared. I'd like to ask our group, rate your level of confidence with your organization's level of readiness at that time. So take a trip down memory lane. I know we're all grizzled veterans now, but at that time, how would you rate your level of readiness and confidence in your organization's readiness? Low being a 1, 10 being supremely confident. Seeing that we have a couple of satisfactories. Talk a little bit more about our response to the pandemic. Initially, the immediate focus is on how do we serve our students. Our process was driven by a needs assessment where we identified a couple of key needs. One, to stay connected. Then to ensure that we provided the emotional supports, and we wanted to be certain that we started strong. In response to the digital divide, we had to make sure that we deployed and distributed technology because 85% of our students had no internet access at home. Next, we had to make sure that we adapted our curriculum and instruction so that it could be more flexible in its delivery, and the tools at our disposal, text, chat, and email, went up exponentially in their use. Perhaps most importantly was our connectivity to community resources. All of our families were somehow touched by the challenges associated with the pandemic. We had to make sure that we could connect families with via food pickup, drive-through, supplies for students and parents. We deployed more than 23,000 devices in our services to make sure that we close the digital divide. We also pointed engagement as a point of focus. So we deployed daily student surveys so that we could keep those constant checks on students. We also had the realization that this was presenting significant pressure on our staff, but together we were able to weather the storm. We wanted to be certain that we could accommodate both our students and our staff. So online communications became much more prevalent. And some of the things that we had to be aware of and make sure our staff were alerted to was that online communications, because they're less formal in nature and can tend to be perceived as more private, students were more apt to share sensitive family challenges. Our task was to make sure that we connected them immediately with counselors and trained professionals so that we can create a system of support to navigate those challenges. Secondly, because it's a passive form of communication, it's easy for communications to be misunderstood or taken out of context. We constantly reminded our staff to focus on clear and concise messaging and communications, and to always check for understanding. Above all, we wanted to make sure that all of our professionals maintained a professional decorum, because it's so easy to lapse into the joking and banter associated with social media. And we wanted to make sure that we maintained clear professional boundaries and were able to address any inappropriate actions in a prompt fashion. At Learn for Life, we take great pride in encouraging and nurturing student voice. I want to share with you all this example that represents an authentic expression from one of our students. It's about a 1-minute video.
Yeah, I just wanted to mention in the video, this really is about student voice and them allowing a space for them, regardless of their beliefs, to share this video. So I'm going to tee it up, and here we go.
We didn't take it seriously. As the world was at war, we just kept dancing. Little did we know, the misinformed are the blind lambs awaiting slaughter. Our leader was blind, and he led us here. He told us the suffocating time would be short, but it's not. We have no end game in sight, no cure, no time limit. I can't see my love for who knows how long. It is the 6 months of disastrous reign under a microbial dictator. Another Great Depression waiting to happen. An apocalyptic book in the making, and we are the authors. Our great country of ignorance can no longer hide behind her ego. We can no longer afford to not fight hard enough. And though the world is hurting and the sky is falling, the earth is healing. Pollution is lifting, water is clearing, animal life is thriving. Mother Earth is teaching us who is really in charge. We are being punished for our crimes against nature. We appreciate being able to take a chair outside and watch the sun. And gratitude for the little things is what keeps us going. We miss hugs from our loved ones. We love deeper now that we've lost so much. If we don't take it seriously, we will lose even more. What we need is not normalcy, but love, change, action. What we need more than anything is to build a better home and never forget all we have done to get here. We didn't take it seriously.
The pandemic presented significant challenges to our staff and our students. As national colleagues, we had to confront the sheltering ordinances, the convergence on distance learning, the impacts to employment for our parents and the students that we serve. We were committed to presenting as a consistent presence and a supportive partner. March 16th, that transition for us represented the transition of 23,000 students and 1,600 teachers from on-site to a virtual environment. So all of the laptops and hotspots associated with that transition, as well as the professional development support, specifically supporting teachers with implementing Google Hangout and a YouTube curriculum channel dedicated to curriculum and instruction. We also implemented our work from home intranet portal. As a result of our focus, we were able to celebrate 1,132 former dropouts who became graduates during this challenge. As I shared, a priority for us was keeping staff connected and safe. Human resources supports, such as additional paid sick leave, were tremendous tools in our toolbox. Also, with affording flexible schedules so that we can accommodate any challenges that arose as it related to taking care of loved ones and family members. Self-care was also a priority. While we couldn't meet face-to-face, we wanted to try our best to maintain morale through virtual social interactions and theme days. The pandemic has represented a shift for all of us. And as a result, we anticipate that there's a reset that we're all going to have to take as it relates to transitioning back to our new normalcy. The TREC Assessment is a tool that we are welcome to utilize with partners nationally in terms of navigating that pandemic reset. This strategy helps us to partner with systems to reassess system readiness in the anticipation of the update that has to happen with strategic planning, school improvement plans as well. We use the results from this assessment to inform the considerations that organizations have to make and the questions that will guide the decision-making process and the planning required to adjust to our new landscape. If you email us at the end, we welcome the opportunity to share our Pinning the Pandemic curriculum as well as the TREC Assessment. Thank you all so much for being here today, and we welcome any questions.
So right now we don't have any questions from the audience, but I'll kick it off. If a school wants to begin this process, what would you think would be step one?
Yeah, I can take that one if that's okay. I think step one really is to take a look at this TREC assessment that we have developed. We developed it based on the data that we were seeing in our schools and are very excited to share it, because when you start to look at not just the student demographics, but when you start to look at teacher attrition rates, the amount of leaves of absence, which we've seen a dramatic increase, obviously due to COVID, what it does is really provide an organizational snapshot of the organizational health, which is just a compilation of a bunch of individuals' health. And that really, what we've started to learn in doing this with our own schools is that we were able to start to be better at taking that diagnostic individually, organizationally, utilizing things like a ProQual survey to check in with our staff. We started to understand that not just for our staff, but for our students, that we could become not just diagnostic, but diagnostic and prescriptive, right? Prescribing certain things for staff, self-care days. When I was a principal, we would, every once in a while we'd get too heavy and we would take a day off and run on a skeleton crew and switch people out. And we would go down to the bay in San Diego and we would do yoga together. We would, play music, we would play sports, and just in creating these opportunities to decompress. So I think step one is to take a true look at your organization, your classroom, yourself, and to start to utilize that. Caprice or Shelton, would you like to tag on with that?
Well, I can jump in on the next question when we're ready, but Shelton, do you want to?
I don't have anything to add. You can go ahead and add. The question was, how are we handling teacher evaluation?
Yeah, on handling teacher evaluation, this is just a weird year. And so what we've done from the very beginning is just to go into this year with a sense of grace and an understanding that that everybody is stretched, and that we have staff who are dealing with tremendous loss in their personal lives as their loved ones have become sick or who have passed away. And they've also been educating our students at the same time as they're educating their own children at home. So we've gone into it first with a sense of grace, and then we've also created flexibility as much as possible. So even though our schools more or less stayed in session, they were they were down to a skeleton crew. So we were having about a third of our kids at most on school sites at any one time. And we had them coming in by appointment. And then in terms of the teachers who were there to meet with them, we were making accommodations so that teachers who might have immunocompromised family members or other kinds of comorbidities could be the teachers that were doing more of the online work, whereas the teachers who had fewer life-threatening challenges would be the ones who are doing work on site. We also allowed teachers to change their hours because everything had gone to a more flexible online system. We allowed teachers to switch from say a normal school day of 8 to 2 or 3 to a school day of noon to midnight. Well, noon to 6 or 7. And that actually ended up matching more or less when a lot of the students were doing their work too. So the first piece was flexibility. But then even at the same time as flexibility, our principals were taking a look at, they're looking at, are the students staying on track? Are we seeing the students, are we seeing the students turning work in every week? For the students who are not turning work in every week, are we seeing the teachers that are responsible for those students making the phone calls and managing the connection and outreach to those students? And what we've found is we've been able to give some direct feedback all along the way to teachers. But more than anything else, I think we have been real careful not to punish teachers for things that are beyond their control. At the same time as holding teachers accountable if they're not connecting with kids, if they're not doing the outreach. And so we actually have let some teachers go who have not been able to or not willing to stick up with their responsibilities to educate students. But not surprisingly, those were some of the same folks that we had challenges with before we went remotely. I hope that helps answer your question.
It does. Thank you very much for that. Let me see. I have another question. How would you say the space of trauma-informed education has changed within the past, let's say, 5 years? And it's open to any of the panelists that would like to jump in.
I can provide my perspective, and I would love to hear everyone else's. But we started this in San Diego in one of our schools about 9 years ago. It was the first time I heard about ACEs science. It was the first time for me I started to even put a framework of my own trauma together and why I was behaving the way that I was behaving. And getting in with our main partners, ACEs Connection, they are a fantastic partnership. If you're not familiar with ACEs Connection, it's the largest online solution-centered journalism portal in the world around trauma-informed practice. It's a great way. You can set up your own schools page. You can get a wide array of curriculum and resiliency tactics and little meditations, just really a treasure trove. But I've even seen it grow just with ACEs Connection in regards to, it used to be about, let's be trauma informed, right? And I think there's still that element of it for some folks. And you can go to different trainings, you can get different certifications, but being informed about something is not enough. I can be informed about anything, and it doesn't mean I'm going to do a darn thing about it. So that's why with our TREC model and other thought leaders in this space, we started to really develop this idea of a framework. How do we go from trauma informed, and you can hear other terms, trauma aware. How do you go from being aware and informed to actually doing something about it? And that's where we created TREC. Again, trauma resilient. The solution is right after the problem. And for us, as Dr. Jeffries mentioned, our schools go through these steps. Every single staff member, once every 2 years, has to take our ACEs Foundation and TREC foundational training that has an actual exam and a certificate. We are working with UCSD right now to finalize a deal to have continuing education units for our staff, and hopefully at these conferences moving forward. But then it was really, now that we know about it, let's do something about it. And that's where Dr. Jeffries mentioned the resiliency support person which interacts with our overarching lifelong learning TREC oversight committee. And that's where we started to figure out, okay, which resiliency programs were working, which areas were suffering more issues, trauma than others, because we're such a wide network. A lot of the best practices came out from that, the data tracking for the resiliency programs, this idea of when you go across our centers, you can see rooms full of kids meditating with staff. You can see kids doing yoga with staff, getting PE credit for it. So that was the big change that I think, if I may, I think that we are one of the tips of the spears of leading that change. We're aware of it. What do we do with it? And with that, go ahead.
I didn't mean to interrupt.
Not at all. I get excited. I'll talk all day, please.
Well, I think what I've really seen happen in the industry around trauma informed a couple of things. One is there is, over the last 5 years, everyone who's sort of in this field is now seeing that there's real science behind it. So yes, all three of us are coming from schools that believe in the trauma informed work. Two of us are crunchy granola California people, and Shelton's our hard-nosed South Carolinian. But there is real science behind the work now that for many years didn't exist, and that has helped make it much more mainstream. But the point that Craig was making that I really want to stress is that it's not just about training. It's also about the processes and procedures that you put in place at your school and the decision making that happens. So a good example of that for us is several years ago, as we were doing our student-centric design, there were a couple of teachers who said, hey, the young women and sometimes young men who were parenting couldn't come to school because they couldn't get access to childcare. And so for a little while, there was a scramble of how do we get childcare for these folks? And one of the teachers who had been a teen mom herself said, well, why don't we just let them bring their kids to school? And that was the birth of the HOPE program. And so we now have 2,800 students who are also parents, and they just bring their kids with them. And why that is connected to the trauma-informed process is that when you're making decisions based on an assumption of innocence, which is a key piece of being trauma-informed, is that we assume that the students want to be there, that they want to do something in their life that's going to help them out, but that there are other barriers that they maybe are not communicating to us, or they might be communicating to us and we're just not listening to or not solving with them. But if we assume innocence and we change in order to support the students, that's a trauma-informed practice. So part of really looking at your educational environment that you're creating is, are you making decisions based on the why of what the kids are experiencing, as opposed to the what of what the school demands? And that's a key piece that has really changed over the last couple of years.
That's such an amazing point, Caprice. When I think about the HOPE program and how, we all remember it went from one center to being one of our preeminent resiliency programs that I think is now in 45 locations. And that's only been in the past 2.5 years. We set up child-friendly areas where the kids can come. They can do homework with some of our support staff. And I think, one thing we failed to mention was that a big part of this is the community partners and social service agencies that do a lot of this work in tandem with our core TREC trainings. We have 305 MOUs across the state and across the country. And a lot of these entities are providing snippets or strong points of social emotional learning and helping students build resilience. I can think of Pause to Share, which is an amazing program where we have service dogs coming from China, and our kids have the ability to train those dogs and then also give those dogs off to the Wounded Warrior Project when finished. And I think that that's an important understanding about being trauma resilient, is that it's about learning, it's about becoming resilient, but more importantly, it's about giving back to create this ecosystem of not doing things to people, but doing it with them.
That's a great point.
Go ahead.
I just wanted to share, Miguel, because I think it's a really compelling question.
Sure.
One of the persistent challenges has been this point of tension around whether we should engage in this work at all, right? Like Craig referenced that there are so many sister agencies that have been working in the social affective arena. Schools should not be engaged in this work. That's been a point of tension that I've had to navigate in multiple leadership roles. And now I just feel that the onset of the pandemic, and because the trauma has been so widespread and so all-encompassing, that the moral imperative for us to engage in this work is now obvious, that trauma-resilient educators are desperately needed in all schools, and this is definitely work that we must engage in with quality.
Great. Thank you. I appreciate that last point, which really leads me to, I guess, my final question. I know we're about to wrap it up. What are your thoughts, if you could make up a prediction about 2021, right? Here we are, everything that we've had to overcome and where we're at right now. What would be your one prediction of an emerging trend within this space that you can see and you're looking forward to seeing how things develop in this space? And it goes to each one of you. So maybe we could start with Craig.
Sure. I mean, I think my prediction for 2021 is we're going to see the need for more of what we are doing and what others are doing in this space, because, even before the pandemic, mental health issues were shooting through the roof, not just for staff, but obviously for students and other stakeholders. So I think you're going to see a large amount of federal dollars that are going to be released to address. I mean, we found $400 million just looking, over the past 6 months of grants, either federal, state, philanthropic, that literally had ACEs science or social emotional learning in the title of the grant. And I think that's a good thing, because it's okay to be new at this. It's okay to not know what you're doing. It's not okay to do nothing, right? So I think that my prediction is that you're going to see a lot of new guppies jump into the pond of trauma-informed and trauma-resilient. And I want people out there that are jumping in to know that there are folks like ourselves that want to convene with you. We want to learn your stories. We want to get better. So that's my prediction, is we're going to see an increase in a lot of these issues, but an increase in the response to those issues through grant monies and through schools and systems, quite frankly, having to change.
Right. Caprice, would you like to add anything?
Sure. Well, I'll contribute too. I think one is that we're going to really start to see that this is not just about the students, that it's really a lot about our staff, and that nationally we're going to have to really focus on the secondhand trauma that our staff are feeling, or just frankly, even the direct trauma that caregivers are feeling. And that will be a critical piece. And I think the second thing that I'd like to offer is that I really believe that this is an equity issue, and that we're going to see more and more that people are going to start to understand the fact that women and people of color have been experiencing trauma that is racism and sexism based their entire lives. And hopefully, we're going to start to see some anti-sexist and anti-racist work that is going to begin to address these kinds of things.
Thank you. Shelton, would you like to add?
I'll just echo the sentiment of my colleagues in that in knowing that there's going to be increased resources and a flood of new actors in this space, you have to operate with a spirit of discernment. You've got to be able to identify quality versus things that are not going to move the dial in your districts. So collaboration, discernment, and making sure that we understand that this is going to be have to be a practice that's more diffusely held in all organizations, not just the specialists who typically address it. We've all got to become more informed and more acutely aware of our roles.
Thank you very much. And with that, I'm going to send it back to Brittany. So thank you again to everybody.
Thank you for joining us today. We will share the recording of today's webinar. And we have several recordings and resources available on our website, www.publiccharters.org/webinars. Thank you for joining us again and have a wonderful afternoon.